to make Elizabeth start with introductions. I'm Amy McMullen. I am the chair of the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union Board. I'm also the chair of the Windsor School Board and vice chair of the new Windsor Westminster Board.
Sherry Greeley, Windsor Board.
Sean Whalen, Chair of Weathersfield School Board.
Scott Richardson from the Heartland School Board.
Karen Woolsey, Director of Special Services.
David Baker, Superintendent.
Jackie Antonovich, Weathersfield School Board.
Heidi Remick, Weathersfield Board.
Robin Tyndall, Weathersfield Board.
Nikki Buck, Chair of the Heartland Board.
Christine Warren, Principal at Heartland.
Tiffany Pisano, Principal at Windsor.
Beth Roy, Heartland Board.
Colleen Spence, Heartland Board.
Sarah Taylor, Heartland Board.
Nancy Pedrick, West Windsor Board.
Board, James Board. No, Bill Yates, Westminster Board.
Elizabeth Rose, Vice Chair of this board, Chair of West Windsor Board, and Chair of the combined Windsor-West Windsor Board.
And I want to thank everyone for being
Angela Doom.
Director of Curriculum, but I'm also taking notes, so talk slowly.
And loudly.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So how many are SU board members? Okay. So I want to thank everyone for coming to the Carousel meeting. This is the second. And thank you for having such a robust meeting last month. I was at a state board function. I serve on another board, and we had a meeting at a professional development review thing. So I want to thank Elizabeth for chairing that. And I will take a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting on August 7th.
So,
Is there a second? Are there any changes, additions, comments to those minutes? No? All those in favor of approving the minutes from August 7th, say aye.
aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And just to assist Angie, who is taking notes, when we have a second, if you could state your name so she can, because sometimes it happens so quickly that you don't know things. And also, I guess when you make a motion, you could say.
And also, we probably just need to remind everybody that for motions and seconds and votes, SU members vote only, right? Everybody else is a participant.
Okay, moving on, are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
No, other than the fact that the food service discussion is going to move to executive session. So, because it does involve a food service contract, it involves personnel, so we'll do that in executive session.
Okay. So, public comments on items not related to the agenda. Hearing, seeing none, we will move on. Discussion and possible action items. A technology update.
Yeah, we had last time mentioned that one of the things that would be good at these carousel meetings would be to have, regular reports from the central office. Larry's going to start off with a technology report, and then we'll do one maybe the following month, depending on what format we stay with on curriculum, and then one on special ed. So we kind of keep in touch. But we'll start with Larry's report.
Already questions? Well, I think that's a wonderful idea. Remember last West Windsor meeting, I asked about a presentation on the grading system and how the standards were set up at some point. And we agreed at that time that
It would make a good presentation.
It would make a good presentation for,
And it would be
for
good
the
for the
SU.
carousel, yeah.
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 We can talk about that and setting the agenda.
Yeah, we can put it on the next agenda if you would like, sure. It's all yours, Larry.
All right, so I'm going to go over some basically numbers and update on what we do. What do we do? Basically, our bread and butter is usually tickets. When I say the word ticket, that's any problem that a teacher has. Usually they come from teachers. We are now getting some from parents and students, especially at the high school. We empower them to create tickets just like they would if they were at their job site or in college. And basically, we go through those tickets. So if you look, this is last year, this is 2 years ago, and then last year. This year hasn't finished yet, so I don't know what the numbers will be, but our tickets are down a little under 2%. Close within 24 hours, that's our goal. As you can see, we're close to meet, we almost at 100%, almost 98%. That means every time a teacher puts in a ticket, within 3 school days, we close it. Yeah?
Are the tickets prioritized in any particular way?
They all come in as medium priority, and then if there's an issue, I'm always looking at the system. If there's something that is a high priority, it's 4 hours. And if something's urgent, which is very rare, it's like 2 hours. But the medium priority is 24 hours.
So do you rate an everyday teacher ticket the same as a parent ticket?
Right now with the system, yeah. It's out of that 3,100, very few are parents right now. They're starting to come in. The more and more they use Power School, they come in to get login questions and stuff like that.
I'm assuming, though, that anything that impedes instruction could be bumped up.
Yeah. If they're saying, hey, I can't, the wireless is down, like network failure, then that would be a higher priority than say, hey, can I get some training on how to, assign a standard to grade work. All right, this includes, by the way, everything. This includes website tickets and the thing we call ITPD, where a teacher puts in a ticket for ITPD, which is a separate category, but it's included in this number, where we come and see them at a half-hour time of their choosing for one-on-one help. Average response time is roughly the same. So that's from when the ticket comes in till we respond. And our average resolution time is roughly the same, year over year. So that's kind of an overview.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
How many people are the responders?
There are 5, including myself, there are 5 in the tech department.
Thank you.
Yeah. Customer satisfaction survey. So at the end of every ticket, there's a survey. They don't have to fill it out. But we got 780. So out of that 3,100, 780 were filled out. And they get 3 categories. They can say awesome, good, and not awesome. And 99% said survey was awesome. So again, it's just a reflection of the great team that we have around us that they do that, because again, they do the bulk of the tickets, the text. These are just some comments. They can also leave comments. I'm not going to read them all, but these are just a smattering of comments from August to November. So I didn't even go through the whole thing. Mike is a computer ninja warrior, a teacher in Weathersfield said. David found a brilliant solution to our problem. David's over at Heartland as his home base, but notice that it's an Albert Bridge ticket. So we share, they go between the buildings. If they can solve it remotely, they prefer that. It's more efficient. We also do a survey every year. Last spring, we do it in the spring. And this is a survey that goes out to all staff, not just faculty, all staff. And how satisfied are you with the reliability and availability of the networking infrastructure? So if you see the blue and red, that's the very satisfied and satisfied. And that's up in the almost 90% are very satisfied or satisfied. So if you can just add up the blue and red, give you an idea. How satisfied are you with the speed? So not just the availability, but how fast it is. 94% are very satisfied or satisfied. Speed of the help desk services. So 100% are very satisfied or satisfied. So separate than the networking, that's how they get access to a tech. What's coming up? So these are some big projects that are coming up. Bill and I were just talking about the SLDS. That was on our timeline. That's been pushed because of the start of school. SLDS, so everybody, because it's acronym of city in education. SLDS is a new state reporting system. So basically what they did is they took 3 separate reports and they made it one big report.
And added about 15,
Yeah,
17.
15 additional reports that were covered in those original 3.
It
The
was
way I'm
due
reading-
August 15th.
Yeah, they were due August 15th and no school has submitted yet, including us, not one school. Unified classroom deployment just rolled out. We just had our biggest wireless upgrade. We replaced almost 95% of the access points in all the buildings. So that was, I mean, that's over 120 access points that we replaced. October is the Power School e-finance. Ryan's been working with Ed's office on that. That'll replace NIMR. So those are the large projects. Obviously, our day-to-day stuff. That's a big Chromebook shipment coming in for all the schools in the SU. This is a picture of my office, what I was working on all year. All summer, I should say, not all year, but all summer. This is where I was buried, putting all the, I know it looks like a beautiful mind, but basically I was putting all standards into all the courses. So they rolled out K through 12 this year. So it was K6 for a while, then it was K7, then K8 for standards-based grading, and now it's K12 this year, which means there's a lot of junior high and high school courses that may not have been covered previously, but I had to make sure I got them all. And so that's what I've been working on. Also upcoming, these are small things, 18-19 Tech PD calendar. So this school year we do a Tech PD calendar where we go to each building at 3 o'clock at random days that teachers can just sign up for and get PD on anything from Google Apps to Power School.
PD?
Professional development training. And we try to do it around the time that they're learning stuff. So for example, we would front load it this year with Unified Classroom because that's new. And then in February, as we're gearing up for SBAC, we would have all the SBAC refresher trainings then. So there's kind of a madness to it. I also want to get to refreshing the dashboard. It's a little stale, so that's something on my to-do list. I'd like to get that done this year. Lightspeed Classroom. This is going to come out this month. It's going to be released to teachers. We beta tested it for a few teachers at Windsor last year. It went really well. Basically, I guess it would be more for the upper level grades. I'm thinking 5 through 12. And what it is it allows a teacher sitting in their classroom to see all the students' Chromebooks and the tabs they have open from their computer. And then they can go in, they can close a tab on a kid, they can say, hey, they can send a message and say, hey, Billy, you're supposed to be working on this Google Doc. Why are you doing this? They can record it and they can screenshot it and send it to the assistant principal, the dean, and say, hey, look at this, I'm not sure, is this okay? I'm kind of a gray area here. They can take one student and spotlight that student so that all their Chromebooks will show that student's screen if they're presenting. So if I was doing a presentation right now, like I am, all your computers will switch that so they can focus on what that student is and not just, surf the web while that student's trying to present. App Maker, Google just released this. I'm teaching it to myself, but basically, I see this more for things at the central office and maybe at the school admin assistant level where tasks that are repeated all the time, we would like to, make that easier and have it secured safely in the cloud. And basically it allows me to build an app. And I'm thinking about things like onboarding employees. Like, wouldn't it be great if Diane could sit down and fill out a form and then it automatically creates a Google account for that, new teacher. Stuff like that. Wouldn't it be great if after Ryan sent out the email notification for the Power School Unified Classroom login that an email went to the principal and said so-and-so is all set to log into Unified Classroom, it's pretty much, think of it like automation.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're going to have that capability in your office. Are you going to teach any of the?
Yeah, so it's not really for teachers. It's more for, we talked about this at our admin retreat, but basically I'd be going out to the secretaries and to the principals and say, what are tasks that you guys do all the time that may rely on paper, that is a pain, it's not efficient, there's a lot of duplication of efforts. What would you like to, would there be a vision for something that you could do that was much simpler efficient, paperless, and I'm trying to think of like
The school forms.
forms would be one example. Stuff like that, things that people are doing all the time. First day patterns.
So that they would say, yes, I need the school forms automated.
Yeah.
And then you would create that app.
I would try to create that.
Well, theoretically,
Yes.
another,
Yeah.
rather than teach them how to create.
Rather than going out to a vendor.
That's-
So for example, one thing we used to do was we paid a vendor about $6,000 a year to, because they had an app already created, every time we added a faculty member to the correct org in Google, they would get the right mailing list, right? Pretty simple thing, it's automated, but this person created an app and they charge us for it. Ryan taught himself GAM, which is Google Apps Management, and it's a bunch of code, but basically, he was able to do what that app does that we paid $6,000 for. We just do it now ourselves. So it's all automated, and he just does it. Yeah.
Could you teach it to kids?
That's what I was wondering.
You could teach GAM to kids. Well, AppMaker particularly, I think, would be great for kids, particularly 7th and 8th grade to high school. I could see that becoming. We have access to it. We're one of the first Google Apps for Education domains that's K-12 that has access to it. So we're it's beta right now. Also, David asked me to put together a big picture review. I did this a couple years ago at a meeting, an SU board meeting in Heartland, and he asked me to do the same thing because there's some new faces on the board, and it would be good for you guys to get some history of the tech department. And as we're entering budget season, the questions that come up from time to time. So this is the tech department FTE wise. There's 5 FTEs, including myself. If you add up all our wages in 2012-13, that's what the wages were. And that's how many one-to-one devices we had in 2012-13. Yeah.
That was for the entire supervisory?
Yes. Those wages are for the entire supervisor.
No, the number of
Yes.
devices.
Everything is
Yeah.
SU-wide.
Okay.
Yeah, so 65. At that time, it was just 5th and 6th grade at Windsor. At that time, they were testing out a one-to-one program.
So there's
Yeah.
one-to-one devices for
Every student gets a Chromebook.
Basically.
Yeah, when I say one-to-one, yes. So if you go back to now, 7 years later, there's 5 FTEs, our wages have gone up, and our number of one-to-one devices have gone up a lot, from 65 to 1,043. So if you break that out on an average per year, our wages have gone up 2.5% a year, our FTEs have remained static, and our number of one-to-one devices have gone up 236%, not 236% total, 236% per year. If you do, so it's roughly 1,500%. And also over that time, we've consolidated a lot of line items at the SU. For example, supplies in 2012-13, that was the last local year. So back in 2012-13, Albert Bridge had a supplies line item, Heartland had a supplies line, every school had a line item for supplies, for technology. Windsor, the SU had their own, which was very small because it was essentially the central office. It wasn't supplies for the kids or the teachers. And the board decided they wanted to consolidate at the SU. The thinking being, if there's a projector bulb that needs to be replaced at Windsor and Heartland has one, why would we buy another one if Heartland has a stock of 4? Let's just take that one and take care of Windsor. And then vice versa. It could be any other way around. So supplies kind of lend themselves to doing that. And that was 2012-13, last local year. And this year, that's how much we budgeted for this current school year. As we've been able to move it to the SU, I've been able to look at the whole SU rather than saying, because what tends to happen, as you guys know, around budget season is, I'm just picking on, let's say there's one school that says, we got $1,500 in our supplies, that's what we've always had, we've had that for 5 years, and every year we want a zero-based budget, so we're gonna say $1,500. Well, what if you need fewer supplies that year, right? There might be one year where Albert Bridge needs a lot of supplies, there might be another year where they don't, and by putting it all at the SU, we've been able to look holistically at the entire SU and say, okay, as supplies are needed, we take them out of stock. It's more efficient. And it also has been efficient money-wise. Difference of 27% down, $3,800. Not a lot of money relative to the entire SU budget, but percentage-wise pretty big. Repairs and maintenance, we did the same thing. The last local year was 13-14. So just like supplies, the following year, we took repairs and maintenance, which if you added it all up to the local budgets was 15,000 and change. We zeroed it out of the local budgets and put it at the SU, and it went down this fiscal year from 15,000 to 10. A difference of 5,000. It's gone down a third. The last time you guys consolidated at the SU was data communication. You guys did that in 2015-16. It was almost $100,000. That's the internet, essentially. The broadband, fiber to every building, including the central office, right? Because it's the whole SU. And it was $99,450 in 15-16. You guys voted that year for the following year to stop that and put it at the SU. And this fiscal year, it's budgeted at $78,600. It's gone down almost $21,000 or 21%. Because it's one pot of money, it's more efficient, and I've been able to work through the 470 E-rate process, which is FCC speak for an RFP, to play a little bit of hardball with the ISPs rather than dealing with 5 different school lines. I could say, hey, we're going to give you internet, and we want a lower price if you want another 3-year contract. So then, David asked me to put together what's left at the local as far as technology is concerned. Because everything else, labor, the techs, broadband, is all at the SU. All that's left at the local budgets is capital equipment and software that pertains to those schools. And a lot of that would be, for example, at Windsor, a lot of teachers use Learning A to Z products. Some other teachers at other schools use them too, which is where they lie, but not every teacher uses it. For example, at Albert Bridge, every school uses Alexandria for their library circulation catalog, but Albert Bridge doesn't. They use Opals. So it's a different product, so we didn't think it was fair to put it at the SU, right, because not everybody's using it. So things like that would be the software piece. Capital equipment is pretty self-explanatory. These are Chromebooks, laptops for the local buildings. So David asked me to put together and show you guys to start a discussion as we're entering budget season, as you get together with your SU budget committee, what it would look like if we put that last piece at the SU for technology. So, as you can see, $40,300 is what Harlan spends, capital, software, you add it up, you get this line over here. And if you add them all up, the bottom right-hand corner, this is the number where you add everything together. Now, Weathersfield, you can see it's 10,000. I'll get to that in a second. If we moved it to the SU with zero change, all right? I didn't do any budgeting. We just literally zeroed it out of your local budgets and moved that big dollar amount, $232,000 and change, to the SU without doing any efficiency finding and nothing else. I just moved it as one big dollar amount. What would happen to those schools based on the equalized people? So I took that 232 and I multiplied it by the equalized people I got from Ed, which is fiscal year 18. It will change, but it shouldn't change too much. So Heartland at 33%, the total at the SU was 77,000. Remember, you spent 40 some on it. So the net difference, the net cost, would be 30,000 and change to Heartland. Weathersfield would be 39. Windsor, West Windsor combined, this next year you guys would be combined, you would actually, your net difference would actually fall $7,000 if we put it at the SU. Now, why would we do that? It's the same argument, just bigger dollar amounts with supplies and repairs, maintenance, and data communication.
How representative are those numbers that you had 18, 19 numbers up there
Yeah.
before?
Yep.
Do those fairly represent capital equipment expenditures at, say, Hartland, Weathersfield, West Windsor, Windsor?
That's a good question.
in the last 5 years?
They fairly represent. Windsor's is actually down a little bit, but they fairly represent, except for Weathersfield and Heartland. So this kind of gets to the question I was going to answer, was just why would we do this? And one of the reasons I would do this is Weathersfield's a great example. Last year they had a tough budget. They cut their capital equipment and technology in half. They went from $20,000 to $10,000. It wouldn't have mattered what was going on in Windsor or Heartland. So for example, wouldn't it be great if everything was in one pot and Weathersfield, for example, we'd be able to look at the entire SU. So just not picking on any individual schools. let's say Weathersfield had a tough budget year, just like they did last year. Next year it could be hard. We would have a dollar amount, and then I could take that pot of money and I could look out the entire SU, working with the principals, and say, these are priorities. And if we're gonna say student Chromebooks are our priority, because we're gonna hold the kids harmless with any budget cuts, then we could say, maybe we don't get that smart board in the Windsor conference room this year. Maybe Heartland doesn't get, 5 document cameras, they only get 2. I'm just throwing these things out there and not picking on any individual buildings. But it would allow us, just like with supplies and repairs and maintenance, to look at the entire SU holistically and say, what are our priorities? And you don't have all these silos and inefficiencies. So so what I'm saying is, that's an example of capital equipment from last year. I could get you the 5-year running numbers, but Weathersfield, I'm telling you right now, it's down 10,000. And if the thinking is they want to bring their capital equipment back up to where it was, they would have to increase their budget in that line next year, unless we put it at the SU, in which case I would meet with the principals just like I always do, and we'd say, what are your priorities for next year? We want to continue the one-to-one for students, okay? We want to deploy out a third of our faculty, a quarter, depending on the year. Every year we do laptops, so there's a cycle. So we're not replacing all the faculty laptops in 1 year. We're not doing no faculty replacements for 10 years, that we have a refresh cycle.
So is there any feeling from your department that having, what was the slide before?
Yep.
These 2 pieces that remain in local
Yep.
budgets but are integral to what your department does, it must be a hurdle, or is it not a hurdle for your department's planning?
It's only a hurdle insofar as the experience I acknowledged with Weathersfield, which happened to Heartland 7 or 8 years ago, where they had a $30,000, $40,000 budget at Heartland, and then that got cut to 20, again in half.
Was that just a tax change that the local town?
It was based on whatever the
decided?
town was going through at that time. So I was meeting with the principal one year, and they said, you know what, it's a really tough budget this year. And I said, well, where are we going to cut? And they said, well, we're going to cut these. And then they said, well, what can we do with this? And I said, here's what you could do with X. And then we had that discussion, and then we build the budget. Similar to what happened with Jean Marie last year. We budgeted 20,000, and right before the budget went to the printers, we cut it to 10 because it's a really tough budget. There was concern, and we had to make changes. And we had to make tough decisions that you guys make all the time when it comes to budget season. But is it equitable across the SU? And then what are your priorities? So maybe in that year, for example, in Weathersfield, just picking on them for that 1 year, because like I said, next year it could be Windsor. They had to, was it the best thing for all the kids in the SU? So, for example, if instead of going, in the example I used, if we were going to do 5 through 8 at Weathersfield for Chromebook replacements, and because of budget cuts, they only had to do 5 and 6, and the 7th and 8th graders couldn't have that, then that's the end of the story. Whereas if it was at the SU, and they said, looking at the whole SU, what's a priority? And if it's student Chromebooks, if it's the one-to-one, this program is important to your principals, and to your teachers, and to you, and to the community, that'd be a way to change that conversation. Yeah.
Do you think it would be beneficial for seeing the district is doing the maintenance already, and that if the district did the hardware, that the district could steer and make choices on hardware based upon the ability to maintain it?
Yeah. Yes. However, I would say the principals and the board have been very supportive of my department as far as choosing the hardware. So it's been very rare where I've had to battle administrators over, they trust my decision process and say, this is where we're going. Here are the pros, here's the cons, here's what I've decided. And that's why you hire me to make these decisions. So.
You asking more about, is there an efficiency? I thought you were asking more about, was there an efficiency?
There could be an efficiency.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't there an efficiency also assumed maybe?
Yes, there could be. So for example, and that kind of goes back to how I started. This is just a spreadsheet that shows you everything in one screen, if you care. But again, I took that number here, multiplied it by this. This is the numbers that came out, and these are the net differences on one screen. Sarah?
Is the, presumably if you look at the $130,000 Windsor cost, that is because high school technology for high school students is more expensive or more intensive, or because if you look, I mean, if you did a per pupil, if you broke that out per pupil, it's a much higher cost than any of the other schools.
Yes, however, I think in the 90s and early 2000s it would have been related to the high school.
Yep.
But I think at Windsor particularly it's much more equitable now. So so if you look at it, one way to say this is Windsor spends more per pupil on kids for technology.
For the technology.
For technology, but I don't think it has much to do with the high school per se.
So it's across the board.
Yeah, they spend on fourth graders, they spend on fifth graders. Now I think back in the early 2000s, it was different. Computers were really for the high school, right? Because that's when you did all your work, the word processing, and Excel was for the high school. But I think it's really K-12. It's not as, obviously you're not spending as much for technology for K, but that wouldn't be the case of Heartland. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't see that as an issue anymore. You could say 10 years ago it was probably more of an issue. What it does show is Windsor does spend more per pupil on technology than the other schools. Good or bad, that's just the way it is. They spend more. And that's why Windsor's goes down. If you look at this negative 70,000 is based off of where they started. It's purely a reflection of how much they spend per pupil on technology, that negative 70,000. Meaning, if Windsor spent $1 per kid on technology next year, they would go way up. Their net difference would go way up. So if Windsor just said tomorrow, we're getting rid of all the technology, next year we're going to budget for $1 per kid, there's 550 kids, that's $550. This net difference would be way up in the SU assessment because there's a pot of money. This is where they were paying per pupil, and now they're not. So it's the negative 70,000 is a reflection of how much they spend per pupil. They spend a lot more per pupil than the other schools, especially on capital equipment.
Right. And what about tuition students at the high school? How is that interface? Are these costs wrapped into tuition costs, or would this incorporate those costs for all students at the high school?
When you guys pick your tuition number, do you take into account how much technology costs at the high school, or how much you want to pay for tuition?
I think it's the total cost of educating high school students, right?
So,
which would include the assessment number, which would include, and the entire budget.
and remember, half the kids at Windsor High School roughly are tuition kids, so they came from your schools.
I guess I'm following on with what Sarah's saying. I think what you're saying, to interpret it another way, is that Windsor could have been having a blip year where they spent a lot of money last year on technology and capital equipment. So I guess before...
It's not actually true. Last year, actually, Windsor's capital equipment for technology went down 5%.
So that...
Windsor historically, and I'm not talking about compared to the SU, obviously compared to the SU, but Windsor historically compared to Springfield, Hartford, other school districts in our area spend more on technology per pupil than they have for many, many years. Taking away IT support, just take support out of it, just on the equipment and on the software.
But I think, go ahead, Sarah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, the point for bringing this up tonight is certainly not to get into, I think asking questions is good, but I think really what we're looking for tonight, and it doesn't even have to be a vote, it just could be a general sense of consensus that Larry continue to explore this with the SU Budget Committee in terms of centralizing those last two items, because I think in talking with Larry today, again, we have tended to silo this stuff. So I think we would look at it differently. Larry would have to much earlier start to meet with those principals and get a sense. And then we'd have to look at those comparisons per student cost across all four districts, or I guess now all three districts. And then see if there's a way, given those comparisons based on the equalized pupil number, that we can be more efficient in the way we order product. both at Windsor and at the other 3 schools.
Could we do what we've done for supplies, repairs, maintenance, and datacom with software and capital equipment?
Because it's going to be a much bigger number.
So it's a bigger number.
Those all ran around 20%, right? So if one of them actually went to 34%, I mean, if Larry could go in with a mindset, and he's talking with the principals early in the year, because
Based around priorities.
Yeah, by early in the year, I mean like in the next couple of weeks, he'd be reaching out to the principals and just going over the equipment needs and the software needs, and then move from there. I think we just wanted some general consensus whether or not.
Something you want me to pursue.
In the end, we can pull it all out, just like we do now.
And it would be no different. And remember, it's important to note that everything I'm saying is under the assumption that there are no increases or decreases. And we zero it out of your local budget. It would not be in your local budget anymore. So it's literally just moving the money. There is an assessment change, but it's literally moving a dollar amount from one place to another. And it would be zeroed out of your local budget. It's not like we put the capital equipment in the SU and keep the $40,000 that Harlan's currently paying, right? That would be zero. That was a net difference thing I showed. And again, David asked me what's left in the local budget as far as technology. There's capital equipment software. He wanted me to run the numbers and show you what we've done in the past, how we've been able to find efficiencies, and can we, I don't want to promise 20%, but if you look at the history, we've done it. Also, if you look back at that, if you remember back to that other chart where it showed the 5 FTEs and how remember that chart where it said devices went up 236%? One of the things I didn't mention in that chart was not only did the devices go up all that crazy amount, and the 5 FTEs were the same, we also, the last 2 years, have been covering Cornish, which is a small school, 80 some odd kids, K-8, but we haven't hired out. We've just been doing their tickets, and we've been going there 4 hours twice a week. And they pay us, if you count up last year and this year, some of the check clears, over $60,000 in revenue to the SU over 2 years. So we've been bringing money in too, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, so there are 5 people, so is there one in?
Yep, so I'll go over them. So where they're based, and like I said, they move around like crazy, especially now more than they used to. J.D. McMahon is at Windsor. Ryan Dower is at Windsor. Mike is at Weathersfield in Cornish. And David Lamb is at Heartland and Albert Bridge. And Ryan covers Albert Bridge every Tuesday. And then I'm in the central office.
So I think it's just some general consensus that we continue to pursue. It was also, it's made me think, as I talked with Larry over the last couple of days, and I think I sent this out in an email form. Do we want to look at this, because we've talked about that, centralizing more and more, working more and more together, creating those efficiencies. Maintenance is another good area where where right now, we don't technically, we don't centralize that. But I also made me think that with Larry, what happened was, it was a fairly slow process, right? We centralized the personnel first, then we centralized the supplies, then we centralized, so it made me think, that's why I didn't want to bring you numbers tonight. I'd rather do this at the SU committee level, budget committee level, and see if there wouldn't be a more gradual way with some of these other areas that right now, Heartland needs a floor scrubber. Why would they need a floor scrubber if we could get the floor scrubber at Windsor to Heartland in the summertime to scrub the floors, right? I mean, those kinds of efficiencies only happen when we really start to consider ourselves, and that's what we've been talking about.
Here's another example. Jean Marie mentioned at her SU meeting that they had 22 new students in how long? The last few weeks or whatever, a month?
Yeah,
so as you said, a transient population, if that wasn't budgeted for in the Chromebooks, wouldn't it be great if we had a stock where we could just take care of those kids and not have to, deficit spend Weathersfield's budget to buy those kids Chromebooks if we had to, however it works out. That's just, again, one example. Numbers go up one building, they go down another building. Teachers move around. We have at least a handful of teachers that share positions. At different schools, who's buying that Chromebook. Now, again, our principals have been very good about that and sharing resources. This would just be the next logical step.
Yeah.
So, historically, I can see what you just described as a real efficiency, but also historically, when you're dealing with software, district licenses can be a real savings.
Yes.
As opposed to school licenses.
Yes, that's the most bang for the buck. And to be clear, I think if you're going to find efficiencies, it would, in year over year, it would be in the software business. Capital equipment, I think you'd have to find it by working with the principals. But as far as software is concerned, and we've done a lot of that already. You already have a software line item in the SU. It's pretty big. These are software line items that are not housed at the SU. So that's kind of the leftovers.
Right.
And that's the library circulation thing we're talking about. That's, for example, Heartland uses ReadySub. The other schools don't. That would be one example. They charge per building. Could we get a better deal if we all went in together? That kind of thing.
It kind of forces you to think that way, right? So that you don't, you can still allow a little bit of outline, but not a whole lot. So I guess in the interest of time for everybody, I think all we just need is that level of consensus that Larry meet early with the principals. We start to get more of the actual projections for FY20, and then sort of bring it back to start with the SU Budget Committee. And then we'll bring it here when we start to finalize our SU budget for
Is this a road you want me to walk down?
And we're going to do the same thing with the SU Budget Committee around gradually rolling out something in maintenance. Does that seem okay with everybody?
Well, what really excites me, I understood the buying power difference of hardware, but when Larry described the transient population issue, that seems like the ability to have some real savings in which all of a sudden from Windsor you have 10 students moving to Heartland, for an example, and then the equipment can be redistributed instead of it can go with them.
Same thing with teachers. They're all our teachers, they're all our kids. Yeah, exactly.
Larry, the only thing I'd ask is, can we get paper printouts?
Yeah, I can either print it out and get it to BJ to give to you, or I can have an email. I can email this presentation to you. Email's good. I can do that.
We could each time a presentation is made.
That's good.
Yeah, and that's true. When I did this a couple years ago, I did email it to everybody in advance. We're working on the numbers till this morning. I will email it to everybody here.
Just filled out the
Thank you.
So is it consensus for him to work with principals and just see what the numbers are and then work with the budget committee?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. That was great.
Elizabeth, can you do the policy thing? I can get that form to you guys this week. I didn't see you do it.
Yeah,
So sometime this week.
I think it says that on the,
That's our
Okay.
next agenda.
Okay.
hopefully Diane did.
I just want to make sure
No,
they knew.
Exactly as I.
Sometime this week, I'll get it out to everybody.
Good.
Yeah.
So next item, policy process.
Right, so we talked about this last time, and it was clear that we had a couple of different committees working on this at the same time, so we tried to bring those two committees together in the last couple of weeks to try to come up with a process. We've got one new district that's emerging out of two former districts that will have to sunset all their policies anyway. We've talked about the fact that some of the local policy manuals are messy at best and rather lengthy. Most of those policies tend to date back to the early 90s, and some of them are pertinent, some of them aren't. So when those two committees got together, they discussed a process whereby we might all, within a reasonable period of time, sunset our policies and reinstate a whole new set, not a whole new set, but a set of policies. So I'll let Elizabeth, who's my other one, and Nikki, if you want to explain what the decision was, that would be great. Who wants to take that?
I was just laughing because our policy manual actually has those 3-hole punch repair stickers.
Reinforcements.
Reinforcements, that's right.
Do you want to?
You do it. Introduce it, and you
Yeah.
want to finish? We didn't prepare ahead of time, can you tell? So we got together last
Friday.
Friday. And we're trying to figure out a way that we could have the SU go through as many policies as fast as possible. And we have roughly about 120 policies in the SU policy manual.
Altogether.
All together.
No, just SU.
Oh, the SU policy.
125 SU policies.
Right, yes.
SU policies, right.
So we had started off by talking about older than 2010, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
This
so-
is all of them.
Right, so all of them, right, so we have 125 SU policies altogether. A lot of them are dated. The joke that I made is that some of them are from before I graduated from high school. So we don't want to just throw those out, but we also don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about them. And so we came up with an idea where we would pass out policies, and each person here, including administrators, would get 4 or 5 policies. And the idea would be that you would read your policy and make a judgment call based on your knowledge of whether you thought it was worth keeping, whether you thought it was not worth keeping, or whether you thought it was worth updating. A lot of the policies in the SU, and this is from a conversation I had with Diane, a lot of the policies in the SU binder were procedures that were implemented in Windsor well before we even had an SU, and we still have them inherited as SU policies. So I suspect that we can get rid of a lot of policies, especially the ones that were the 1990s. They're clearly out of date, and all of the new, we've been trying to keep up with the new required policies, and so clearly those policies should be easy to read, and we probably will want to keep them in the form that they're in. So the idea is that each person would get 4 or 5 policies, and then what Larry was talking about is we put together a survey that says, I just read this policy, and he'll give us a drop-down menu of this policy. I want to keep this policy. I think the SU should keep this policy. I don't think the SU should keep this policy, or we should revisit it. And then any comments that you have. So the parts of the policy.
And we ask that you add, you take the time to add a comment for, don't just answer yes, no, maybe.
Right. Yeah, that you take
Do a comment for each policy.
Yeah. So summarize what you thought of the policy in your comment box. And that way, and then, so we would collect all of that, and that would go into a database so that we're not violating open meeting law. We're not sharing it on a Google spreadsheet, which was our first idea. So that goes into a database. And then at the next SU meeting, we trade. So everybody gets a new set of policies, so they all get a second read and they all get a second opinion. And then we look at what everybody thought of the policies. We can look at the database will output a spreadsheet, and we can sort the spreadsheet and do some analysis on the spreadsheet and figure out what policies are definite keep, what policies are definite toss, and what policies need to be revisited.
We think that if we do it this way, that by the end of the calendar year, we'll be able to either keep or dump en masse, the ones that we want to keep or dump. And then between January and June, we can revise the ones that need to be revised. And then by June, they'll all be done, completely done.
Excellent.
And then one of the things we've considered and talked about is that once we get to that point, everybody would sunset their policies, and essentially you'd have one policy, you know, that the Heartland School District shall abide by the policies.
There will definitely be ones that are specific to.
And there might be some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Those would be very few, though.
the history is that each district had all these policies before they came to the supervisory, and some of those are redundant, and they're impossible to search. So this will do a lot of cleaning out of that.
Also, once they've been reviewed twice and it's agreed upon as far as the database is concerned that this list of policies can be rescinded, then all we would need to do is print that list and I'll take a motion to rescind these policies.
That's right. And then we asked at our last meeting, we asked Larry to make an index of all of them and put them all online, but on Friday, we asked him to just hold off on that until we've decided what to do with each of them. And then he'll actually put them all online, indexed and searchable, so, yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So you're all going to get your first packet tonight.
Also, just to let you know, on Thursday, this coming Thursday, there is a webinar presented by the Vermont School Board Association from 6 until 7. You have to register for it, but it is Policy 101. So everything you always either wanted or didn't want to know about policy. And by registering, even if you can't sit and watch it from 6 until 7, you will get it in your email, the archived edition with all of the slides. So I highly recommend everyone to do that. It's free.
And they're riveting.
So I'm so confused a little bit. At what point or part of the process are we checking off whether, for instance, we have achieved at the School Board Association's website, they have like the recommended, suggested, and other policies and that.
They're in there. Is that what you're asking? All of those are.
We had most time reviewing the old ones. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, you can.
Okay, so if we're reviewing existing policies, am I correct in understanding that? So, yeah, the old ones, and then someone or the committee is going to
We've mapped.
say, oh, that's actually A1.
Yeah, we've done all that mapping.
We've got that all.
Heartland did that for both Heartland
That's all
and the
done.
SU in a meeting. So we have that map. But the idea here is to just get a handle on the existing policies. There are policies that the SU should look at that we don't currently have. But first we need to get a handle on what we have and get rid of the chaff. And then later we'll add those.
Yeah, so I guess that's the good, right, it's a valid, so let's say 2 people say, yeah, get rid of this one, get rid of this one, and lo and behold, it's actually something that's required. Right, because I just feel like, shouldn't we start with that and say, do we have it, yes or no?
Amy, yeah.
So you get your packet of policies.
Yes.
That could be the first thing you look at.
Yeah.
Go to the Vermont School Board Association website for required policies and see if that version is what you need. And if not, then that would be your summary at the very end. This is not a required policy, or this is a required policy, but it needs this, the way we have it written, it needs updated.
If you look at the dates of all of the policies, this process becomes a little bit more obvious. There are policies that are either dated in the late 90s or they're dated after 2010. And there's almost nothing in between. And so even if it's a required policy and we have a 93 date, chances are the language is not right for current times. So it becomes pretty clear.
The last time they were in this.
Did I just get it?
Oh, did you get missed? Don't worry.
Keep moving.
That's not gonna happen.
Sorry about it.
Notice how quiet she was.
She was, she didn't say a word.
One of mine is bloodborne pathogens.
Yeah,
And
but
it's
that's all
dated
gonna have to go by the website.
1993. So I could go to, yeah, I mean, just my librarian background says anything.
Anything that says
I would also see if there is a bloodborne pathogen required, and say that this, as it's written, needs to be rescinded, we need a completely updated.
Okay, so can I just ask another question? So, all right, so I could have one that's communicable diseases, yeah, clearly has to be.
More than anything.
Can I trade mine?
Why do you want a different one?
All of the ones.
Not very interesting.
We can send a link to it. David?
Yes,
I don't know who to tell to send the link. Or maybe
Larry.
Angie can write it. Larry's
who's not here anymore?
Angie can write it in the minutes. Can we send a link to?
Larry's here.
Oh, Larry's here.
Larry will send the link.
Larry, can you send a link to everybody to the VSBA policy? There's a document that the VSBA has online that just says that these are the required, recommended, and to be considered policies.
You could send that out with the survey, actually.
Yeah, and if you need me to find it for you.
So you'll send it to the survey, Mary?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then,
I'll send out survey this week.
okay, so one more question. If they have a policy that says communicable disease procedures or whatever it is, why would we not just default to their policy instead of rewrite?
That's exactly what you're going to write in your.
That's exactly what you're going to
You're
write in
going
your
to
comment.
say, we should keep this policy, but we should axe all the language here.
And just use.
And go with the
Or
template.
this is a
Yep.
procedure, not a policy.
So what you're going to get from Larry is the link to the survey,
Okay.
the link to the VSBA required and recommended policies, and now you have your little packet that you're going to go through with those links, right? And then what I would do on this packet is I'd write your name on the top of the front page, so we know who's looked at that set already, and then bring this back to the next meeting with, I assume we're going to try one more carousel maybe, and bring it back, and we'll exchange them, and we'll do the same thing in October, and then we should be good to go at that point.
I seem to be exclusively substance abuse and drug paraphernalia, but
I'm just HIV.
Well, we did that intentionally.
thanks. One thing that was brought up on Friday that I think is really important for anybody else who has anything about drugs is that the marijuana law has changed, and so it is no longer an illegal substance. So the policies, all policies pertaining to it have to be updated.
Yeah, they have to specifically say marijuana.
I did.
Except for students, it's still
Right.
illegal for
Yeah.
students.
Right, correct.
I did reach out to VSBA on that, and they're going to review the policy in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and get back to me as soon as they review it. So, I just put that. In Heartland, we decided to stay tuned, because we were going to update it tonight and decided to just wait.
What's the time frame on needing to get our feedback on this, so we're ready for the next board meeting?
I would say just as long as the feedback's in by the next board meeting, you're good.
Fill out the survey before the next board meeting.
Fill out the survey before the next board meeting, which would be the first Monday in October, which would be October 1st, is my understanding. Right?
Great.
And for ease of things, are we commenting, like if there is a new policy, we're saying down in the, you're giving a comment section, right? where we'll
There's going to be a
say-
comment section.
We'll say,
Right.
let's replace it with this one, so we don't
Right.
have to
That's
spend
awesome.
time doing that.
Replace this with the VSBA
Yep.
approved policy, yep. That's all you need to do, and then we'll take it from there.
Did you say the next meeting will be the next Monday or the next Tuesday?
We went Tuesday this time because of Labor Day.
Yeah.
My understanding was we were going to meet Mondays because 3 of our boards met on Mondays. The only one that didn't was West Windsor, who met on Thursdays. So usually Monday nights seemed okay for people, but
So we're doing
we can,
The next one is.
next one would be October 1st at Heartland.
And the time?
And the time would be 5:15 for your local boards, 7 o'clock for your carousel meeting.
Is that the job of the principal to communicate that, or does Diane?
Diane will communicate it, but then she'll work with you and Mike and Jim to get that set up, much like they did here with Brian. And by the way, Brian did a great job getting us ready for tonight. And Jean, I want to thank you for the hospitality tonight. This was a great setup. It is a little stuffy. Don't mention that word, air conditioning.
I think
So are
nicely
we,
conditioned.
does everyone understand the policy process? And we're ready to go for October 1st. Okay. Thank you for all the work that.
Yes.
Thank you for the work you're going to do.
We are not going to do.
It's something that you just want to, bam, to people.
Yes, thank you for taking up some of the slack for us. It would have taken forever if we were just doing it.
So when we packaged these in packs of 4 and 5, we didn't need a lot of the administrative team, board members that are here, and then there were 2 left over. Christine very generously agreed to take one of those, and I will take the other one. And so we're done.
Great, thank you.
That's good.
So we are at a part of our meeting where we set the next agenda. Policy process will be part of that. Are there other items?
Could we have an executive committee or an executive session discussing Dr. Baker's evaluation?
This evening?
Well,
You could
next-
add it to that
next
one and
time.
do it. I mean, you wouldn't want to
At the
spend
next
the whole,
meeting?
or at least, yeah, either way.
Would that be all right? Not tonight,
Yeah.
the next meeting.
Okay.
October.
Mhm.
So we could make that an agenda item, superintendent's evaluation, just so you don't forget it.
Okay.
And how about a report like Larry's today? Would you like to have, Angie, you're okay on the first? Do you want to do something around curriculum, and that would roll into the standards-based grading and some of those pieces?
Right.
Does that work?
Well, it's not just about standards-based grading, but it's more about, just to be specific about how the standards, how you arrived at the standards.
Right. Angie, do you think that's something you and I and Larry could put together?
Yeah.
You know, one other interest, sort of to give you the complexity of it is, you know, how is a standard arrived at mathematically?
Right.
How are you doing GPA? Are you doing GPA? Things like that.
Yeah, so like, I don't know, NGSS did something. I get what you're
Yeah.
saying now. How is the score?
Yeah, that would be part of it. I think generally, you know, where do the standards come from? How are they built into, Larry referred to it tonight, how are they built into a teacher's unit planning, lesson planning? How are they assessed? And then how are they then translated to things like transcripts, reports, you know, final parent portal? I think we could just do the whole thing. And this is important. You may get questions from community members. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know at the high school level, we've had a lot of discussions specifically on that topic of when a now junior is a senior next year, they don't have a 0 to 100.
They don't have any what?
They won't have a GPA in the 0 to 100 scale. They will have a standard-based grading, and so there is some mapping document on the back end with a student profile that goes to colleges like other schools.
We can show you all that.
Right. But you still can create a GPA.
Yes, you can.
standard.
So what is the back
Yes.
end
Okay.
calculation?
Yeah. And then we should probably have something, what have you got so far for next agenda?
Curriculum, policy, the standards-based grading, et cetera, in the.
Policy, standards-based grading. And we should probably put something about, we may or may not be ready, but preliminary SU budget, you know.
Mhm. That will be a full meeting.
That's a full meeting.
Yeah.
And the budget committee members, if you could just hang around after this meeting, just quickly when we're done, let's try to nail a date down to meet the next. I know we sent out a doodle poll, but it didn't, nothing matched up, so.
Okay.
This is not an agenda item, but a carousel format item. One of the things that Heartland is struggling with is taking notes while meeting.
Yeah.
Are there any ideas on that? Because it's not fair to the clerks, because
Right.
our clerk has not participated in the meeting as much as she
So
normally
it's
would.
basically minute taking, huh?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges of the
Yeah.
carousel format that's
Right. I
really,
think you're right.
we're struggling with. I don't know, maybe we're the only ones, but.
Let's think about that. Well, we've got, we took care of it tonight with Angie, but in the local meetings, Weathersfield has their own note taker who basically, I'm told.
She approached me after our meeting. This isn't easy for her.
The time is not easy?
But she's anticipating a change in schedule. We have our own issues, but it hasn't.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure if they have a problem yet.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Do we need
But yeah,
just one
let's-
for this group, or you're saying we need just?
No, for each of the.
We're talking about the individual
each of the
boards. They meet at
individual
5:15,
meetings.
because Diane can't be in 4 places. And she used to do 3 of the boards. She did West Windsor,
I didn't know.
Windsor, and Hartley.
Yeah.
So we'll talk, we'll see, we can ask. It's a stipend position, it's once a month.
Yep.
We could reach out to other administrators, other administrative assistants, see if anybody wants to
See
do
if they
it.
want to.
We've got a high school student that needs community
Yeah,
service. Reading for
yeah. Tiffany, did you hear that suggestion down here?
High school faster than.
A high school student who might be looking for community service?
Community
or-
service. Free high school.
Or a stipend, yeah. We'll take that under advisement.
Can look into that.
Thank you.
So, let's see, we did have the executive session for food service.
We're still on the agenda of our,
Okay.
Next agenda?
I just wanted to speak up on, as one of the negotiating team members, we had talked casually about maybe later tonight, just David, I had,
Trying to find a time to meet,
yeah, we need something there, whether it's part of the next meeting
yeah.
tonight.
Can you do that as a Zoom call? Can you do that as a Zoom?
We could try that, yeah. And that's Scott, Heidi, Bill, and Beth, right? Who's the Heartland rep? Oh, no, that's Scott.
Got a question about that. Is Bill representing, no, Beth, you're doing it too, so it's Windsor, West Windsor?
Yeah, they're sort of representing the new board. You know, the new-
2 people representing the new board?
Right.
Well,
Okay.
because of the high school.
Yep.
Yeah.
History thing,
Yep.
in terms of what's the new ones there versus the rest of the school.
Okay. I can pass on
And,
stuff
just,
from last year.
Scott, if you're correct as far as maybe having a quick update on where we are on the timeline
Right.
for negotiations. There's-
In the public meeting.
Yeah, just, this is, we're at
Yeah.
this step, we've met twice, we haven't met, we're, yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah, we're just seeing. Are we ready to go into executive session?
Mhm. I think so. And the administrative principals do not have to stay if they don't want to.
We have that session.
Oh, that's right, so, yeah, you have a meeting afterwards. You should stick around. Hopefully this won't take too long.
We didn't set the next
So
agenda.
I will take a motion to go into executive session. Is there a second?
Second, Vicky.
Second.